right about now. The Funk Soul Brother, check it out now. The Funk Soul Brother, right about now. Right up now, check it out now. The Funk Soul Brother, right about now. Now.
Well, hello everybody. Welcome back to the Right About Now podcast. This is John Small. Man, I am excited about our episode today. I am so excited to share this one. I'm still reeling from this interview because I felt like I learned so much, and there's so much I need to do now that I know it that I don't even know where to start. So I'm gonna share this with you, and then hopefully we can all benefit from Amy Suto's words. Now, who is Amy Suto? She is a former Hollywood TV writer who walked away from everything. She walked away from a great cushy job in writers' rooms to build a 7-figure writing business. And she has a new book out called Write for Money and Power, The Anti-Starving Artist's Guide to Becoming a 7-Figure Writer. And Amy is just a wealth of knowledge. She's one of those people that knows a lot about how to make money writing in this particular point in time. All the different platforms that you can use, all the different sort of tricks you can do on the back end, and just ways to make what you put out in the world make some money. And it's changed so much in the last 10, 15 years that it's so important to kind of know, it's so important to sort of keep up with what's going on. Where are the outlets that are paying? How do you position yourself in a way where you can best monetize your work? Because we all know we can write. We all know we're great writers, but there's a whole other element now to writing, which is marketing yourself and getting your skill set out there into the world so that people know to hire you and to buy your work. So Amy and I discussed the 3 pillars that writers need to think about when they're monetizing their work. We talk about her love of self-publishing. Listeners to my show know that I agree with that. We talk about some of the surprising platforms she uses to monetize her work, such as Upwork. Had no idea. We talk about Substack. I think you all know that I'm on Substack as Small Talk, and we talk about ways to optimize Substack to maximize your revenue. We talk about new ways that freelance writers are making money in 2025 that I had never even thought about. We talk about the different ways that she finds her clients, and we talk about the surprising ways that she finds her clients. One of them being cold calls. Who knew? We talk about the 50-50 rule for creators. You'll find out all about that. And ultimately, how to stop romanticizing the starving artist myth and start making some money for that work, because you deserve it, y'all. Fair warning, you might want a notepad for this one because there is so much good information to collect. Without further ado, I bring you Amy Suto.
Thank you so much for having me.
I am so excited to meet you and talk to you. My God, I have my notepad ready. I'm ready to take notes because you're talking to a person who is very interested in this subject matter, how to make 7 figures as a writer. Let me just do a brief introduction to you. You are a former Hollywood TV writer turned 7-figure writer, ghostwriter, creator. You teach writers how to build power through their ownership of their work. And you are very against the whole starving artist concept. And you have a new book out, which is called Write for Money and Power, which we're going to talk all about. But I just want to welcome you to my Substack Live, Small Talk.
Yeah, I'm really excited to be here.
Very excited to have you. Okay, I always like to do an origin story before we kind of get into the nuts and bolts of this interview. But you have an interesting origin story because you started your career kind of on one path and then you made a decision to go to different directions. So tell me a little bit. Let's start at USC. You went to USC for writing and for screen and television. And then what happened after that?
Yeah, so I've followed the route that a lot of writers who want to write professionally follow, where we graduate from the film school, we work assistant jobs, climb the ladder, eventually get to become a TV writer. And that felt like the dream, especially with the golden era of television in the early 2000s. It felt like the perfect place for writers. But when I climbed the ladder, finally got into my dream TV rooms, writing on dream episodes, writing on a spy show, working with CIA agents for my episode, I was so excited. But then I kind of realized through the process that it wasn't something that actually fulfilled me. And the environments that I was in, there was a lot of really cool, talented people, but there were also restraints of the industry, which is now undergoing a lot of pressure right now that I was starting to see crumble back then. And luckily, when I was making my career in Hollywood, I was moonlighting as a memoir ghostwriter. So when one writer's room would close and then I would be jumping, between jobs to my next one, I was ghostwriting memoirs. And what started to happen is that when I was in between writers' rooms and trying to figure out what my next leap in Hollywood was, then all of a sudden I get scooped up by this memoir client that'd be like, here, I'll fly you out to tell my story. Like, come on out. And then suddenly I realized that I was being more valued by my freelancing clients who were paying me more and more than what I was even making in Hollywood, which was crazy. And I started to realize that my talents were better kind of spent in Hollywood. And for the past decade, I've been working as a freelancer. I've done all sorts of things in copywriting and content writing, but my main focus has been memoir ghostwriting. And that's what I do and what I focus on now.
So I've done a bit of memoir ghostwriting. I have never been close to the 7-figure range. So I want to know how you got there. But how did you even break into it in the first place? Like, how do you become a memoir ghostwriter for people? Like, how did you get into that world?
Yeah. So memoir ghostwriting, one of the best ways to get into it is actually to do ghostwriting for founders, copywriting. My first ghostwriting assignment ever, I was doing a series of blog posts about this man's life. And then we got to the end of the blog post series and he's like, how about we just turn this into a book? And so that was kind of my first foray into it. But the thing with ghostwriting jobs is that they're very hard to find and they're very kind of like underground. It's actually part of the reason why I built the writing job board over at Make Writing Your Job, because I kept getting overbooked by clients and I needed to like send my clients to other writers. And so I just started sending them to my newsletter subscribers at Make Writing Your Job. And that's kind of how we started the writing job board. But when it comes as a memoir ghostwriter to really creating like a pipeline for clients, it's really helpful to try to figure out what are the ways in which you attract clients? What are the ways in which you're building a Substack, a blog to really bring people into your world? Because referrals are part of what help us as memoir ghostwriters, but because we're ghostwriters, we really do have to find other ways to bring people in and magnetize our clients to us through things like SEO and building our presence on Substack. And then also as ghostwriters, publishing books under our own name, which gives us credibility.
Let's step back. For people who might never have had the experience of being a ghostwriter, tell us exactly how that works. Like, I'm curious about your process. Like, I can tell you how I did it because I've done it a few times. I'm curious to see if we have a similar system.
Yeah, every client is very different. I'm actually finishing up a business book right now for a client that flew me out to Vienna last year.
Oh my
and
God.
I got to meet his entire family.
Can I have your life? You're like making 7 figures, just getting out to Vienna. Okay.
It was really special because I knew nothing about Austrian culture and I got to go out to the Viennese countryside and get to see where he grew up. And then he flew me to Canada to meet his business partners and kind of where he had built his business. And so that was a really unique project because I got to do a lot of in-person interviews with family members of his. So that was really unique. And I think interviews are the lifeblood of a ghostwriter. So as a memoir ghostwriter, you're playing a journalist in somebody else's life. You have to learn how to ask the right questions, get things out of people, really come up with these really interesting ways to even get into maybe subjects that might be a little bit more sensitive to make sure that you're not only creating their life on the page in an interesting way, but also doing justice to the parts of their life that might be a little bit more vulnerable or harder to put down on the page. And that's kind of like your job as a memoir ghostwriter is balancing what the client wants and also trying to make a book that is going to do really well with audiences.
So what was it about? So you had this dream job as a, TV, writer, right? You're in a writer's room. Like a lot of people have this fantasy of that. Why did you walk away from that was it just the money or was there something more to it?
Yeah, so many pieces. I think what we're seeing now is the Hollywood has kind of been crumbling in part because of the creator economy's ascension. And Hollywood hasn't been innovating in a lot of different ways. And the thing with Hollywood is that a lot of the creators that I knew who were incredibly talented writers, showrunners, had amazing scripts that they could just never get made. They were stuck working on Avengers 14 or whatever the studios wanted to make. So the creators were losing power as the years had gone on in Hollywood. And what was really interesting in the Netflix earnings call last year is that they were talking about how the biggest competitor to Netflix these days is actually YouTube. And so that's kind of the most interesting shift that's happening right now is the creator economy. And I had written a blog post a few years ago when I left left Hollywood talking about how Hollywood was dying and is going to be replaced by the creator economy. And for writers, that's actually a really good thing because it allows us to once again kind of spearhead the content that we want to see out there and be able to make things ourselves. And that can sound a little scary, but when you think about platforms like Substack, where we can monetize our work, and self-publishing books has been easier than ever. And there's so many new avenues for writers to collaborate with others to get their work made and completely bypass traditional gatekeepers.
Yeah. So tell me, I think it's better. Some people might not understand what you mean by the creator economy. Tell me how that's different than the sort of usual traditional Hollywood economy.
Yeah. So in the more traditional gatekeeper-led economy like Hollywood or traditional publishing, you go to a gatekeeper with a script. You usually have to get an agent first, and you have to just kind of go through all these meetings and do all this networking to get a shot at a studio or a publisher saying yes to you. And they have their own agendas. They have their own favorites. They have their own kind of idea of what they think readers want. When we're talking about the creator economy, you bypass the gatekeepers and the networking and all of that completely, and you go directly to your readers and say, hey, I have a story I think you like. Do you want it? And while that puts more of the marketing responsibility on your shoulders as a creator, it also allows you to cut out the middleman cost of the percentage you're giving away to your agents. In Hollywood, you also pay a percentage to your lawyer. You also give away so much freedom and can only work on certain projects at one time. You can kind of cut all of that out and go directly to your audiences in different formats through self-publishing, through publishing your work on Substack, through independent filmmaking. There's so many other paths that you can go directly to your readers and to your audience that then you keep 100% of the profit, but you do also have to invest either your own money, get financing, or kind of build up and fund your own work.
So let's maybe we'll talk about writing, the writers specifically right now. I'd imagine a lot of our listeners, watchers are writers. If you're on Substack, you're probably a writer. We might have some, people who make their own TikTok videos. Hello, but mostly I think we're writers. So let's stick to kind of that model and how you monetize yourself as a creator in the creator economy as a writer. You talk about there's kind of like three. There's probably more than three, but the three that kind of stood out to me, and you kind of mentioned them earlier, is that you can do like a paid newsletter. Like, let's talk about the three different models and we'll kind of go to take a deep dive into each model. Excuse me. So one is sort of like the paid newsletter, right? The Substack, like what we're doing right here is Substack. This is free, but if I were to, figure out a way to monetize or to have people subscribe to be watching this and to be paying for my content, that's one. You've talked about, you have a few books, the most recent, which is, I will say it again, Write for Money and Power. So there's self-publishing, which is very important that we make that distinction between self-publishing books and then having, books published by traditional, the big three publishers. And then freelance writing, which in your case includes ghostwriting, memoirs, writing your own books, but also not writing your own books, but writing, for other people. Did I crystallize that right? There's sort of three main pillars for writers to monetize and to make money.
Yeah, definitely. So in my upcoming book, Write for Money and Power, I kind of try to put these three pillars as these interdependent things: the paid newsletter, freelancing, and self-publishing. And the reason why they work well together is because if you want to get freelancing clients, you need a portfolio. Might as well have that portfolio on Substack. And if you're writing on Substack and you have an audience of readers, then you should write a book that is maybe inspired, or a collection of your Substack posts that you can then give to your readers and then have your audience kind of self-perpetuate there across the three. And so the reason why these three just work so well together is because they allow you to either repurpose content or reuse content, or the money you get from freelancing you can use to, invest into book marketing for your self-published books. And so these are kind of three parts of the flywheel that work really, really well for writers in the creator economy. And they don't really require very much startup cost. These days with self-publishing, you don't have to buy a warehouse full of books to ship out. You can do print on demand with Amazon or Ingram Spark, and they will ship and print the books for you. And so that's kind of why I think these are really accessible for writers, and they allow us to put our work out there without the need of gatekeepers.
So I will confess that I have done all three of these pillars. And, I've been in the media business for a long time, and I will also confess that I am not making seven figures. So I want to figure out what I'm doing wrong or what I could be doing better. And I'm sure a lot of people might be in the same boat I am. So let's talk first about the paid newsletter. So I'm relatively new to Substack. Is Substack the only paid newsletter? I mean, we're on Substack now, but is that one that you recommend as being that a good venue for that type of for that pillar?
Yeah, so Substack's my favorite platform because the incentives are more aligned. And by that, I simply mean that Substack takes a percentage of your paid revenue, whereas platforms like Beehive and I believe also Ghost charge a per subscriber fee per month to host your newsletter. And so when I think about platforms that are incentivized to help you make people turn into paid subscribers and to see the value of what you have behind the paywall, Substack's a good platform for that. The one thing, I've been on Substack for almost 2.5 years now, and what I've discovered with Substack, like my current Substack, we've increased almost over $100,000 in value in 12 months. And so the reason that I think we've done so well on Substack is because, one, we understand the algorithm really well. And I know people talk about algorithms and algorithms are made of people, but there's certain changes that we made on the back end that really made a huge difference. Even something crazy is that we put our primary category as business, and all of a sudden Substack sent us a ton of traffic. And we weren't sure, like, okay, well, we've been doing the same thing for the last year and our traffic spiked when we changed our primary category to business. So we did an experiment where we changed the primary category to literature, and then our traffic completely started dropping. So there's certain things like that I write about a lot on my pseudoscience Substack of the experiments that we're running where we're like, oh, just changing your primary category, not even your secondary category, can really shift the way the algorithm promotes you to readers trying to find you. And then even thinking about the welcome emails, how are you kind of reaching those initial users and what is your call to action? I read a lot of Alex Hormozy's books, and while some people look at him as a bit of a hustle bro and very, very in your face aggressive business advice, I've used a lot of his principles for funnel building, for the really nitty gritty, boring business side. And my co-founder, Kyle Kors, has helped a ton with all of the optimizing on the back end. So when it comes to writers who are trying to figure out how to optimize on places like Substack, there's a lot of boring, mundane work that if you can really figure out how to crack the optimization side, the business strategy side, you're going to have so much more time for the creative side and you're going to see so much more growth. But most people either don't know what kind of that mundane work they need to put in, or they're just not sure or don't have time. So that's kind of the challenging part, is that a lot of us have messages that so many people want to hear. A lot of us have enough creative talent where if we're able to reach the right readers, then we're able to make a lot on Substack. We're able to build thriving communities. But it's really about trying to figure out what is the boring business work keeping us from bridging that gap, and how can we work smarter, not harder, with these algorithms to get to where we need to go.
Yeah, I think this is the real challenge for creative people, is that you have to, these days, you can't just be super creative and write great content. There's a whole other side of this, which is kind of more on the marketing, like you said, back end part of it, and figuring out how to, like you said, like figuring out the algorithms. I mean, it sounds exhausting to me personally, but I guess, if you really want your stuff to resonate and really get to as many people as possible, and then ultimately make a little bit of money off of this, more than a little bit of money, you need to spend at least, I don't know what percentage of time, on the sort of creative side of stuff versus the sort of back end stuff. Like, what would you say? Like, what's the ratio? Like 80-20, 70-30? Like, I feel like most of us spend 90%, 95% on, writing really great content or creating really great content, and maybe 10% on the other part of it.
Yeah, I think that the percentage is more 50-50, but I do think that marketing can, even though there's a lot of mundane elements of it, it can be fun to, especially once you start seeing some crazy momentum.
Yeah, then you
start making changes. Then you're like, oh, I'm going to dive into all of this like boring stuff. Like a good example of this is when we started to change our welcome emails. At first, we just kind of had template welcome emails with some personalization, but then we started to realize, oh, well, what if we put in like a special 7-day offer in the welcome email? What if we did this? And then another tip that I had actually gotten from when I was on a writing retreat with Substack and bestselling author Emma Gannon earlier this year, she had mentioned that one thing that she had done was email free subscribers directly to ask them to upgrade. And so then that created a lot of different kind of ideas that Kyle and I had this year to just email our free subscribers with special deals, special offers. We asked them, hey, is there a reason why you haven't upgraded, and what can we create to help you? And we just have been sending tons and tons of emails just to our free subscribers, not just to convert them, but also give them the educational tools and the things that would help them make the most of their subscription. I think a lot of people neglect their free email list, wanting to just email everybody without thinking about how can I really meet people where they're at in their subscriber journey.
I mean, my free subscriber email list basically is my email list at this point. I mean, I have 4,500 subscribers, only 31 are paid subscribers. So obviously I'm not doing I'm doing something wrong here. I mean, I think people, I hope they enjoy the content. Give me a thumbs up or a heart, at least one heart if you enjoy the content that I put out in the world. But getting people to pay. And look, I get it. It's hard to part with your money. And I think there's one sort of flaw in the Substack system. Thank you for the hearts. One flaw in the Substack system is that, because you're individually having to subscribe to all these different people, it's kind of like when streaming first came out and everybody was so excited. Oh, I'm getting rid of my cable box. I don't have to pay this, whatever $60 a month cable thing because now I can just get individual channels. But then you end up paying for all the individual channels. So it's like the same thing with Substack where suddenly you are, if you keep subscribing to people you like it starts to add up. And so I guess the challenge for us as creators is what makes our offering so unique that people are willing to actually subscribe, to us and, give the $5 to $10, whatever it is that you're asking, to us and not to the 40 million other people that also have Substack accounts.
Yeah, and I also think
how do you do that?
There's this really interesting marketing kind of study that was, this is kind of a well-known piece of knowledge with marketers where in order for somebody to buy, they need to have 7 touch points with you and your brand. And not just content, but purely hey, you are not a paid subscriber. Do you want to upgrade? Here's a deal. Here's some more information that you might be missing. Here's a little bit about me as the creator of this Substack. And I think that we forget or we think that people are reading every email we're sending out or absorbing everything we're telling them or see all of our posts on social media. But in reality, most of our subscribers are missing our emails. Sometimes they're going to spam. Sometimes they aren't seeing any of our social media posts. So I think we as creators are not wanting to sell ourselves too hard sometimes. And that's at our detriment because our subscribers want to hear from us. They want to hear how we can give them something not only different from what's out there, but our subscribers might not know what else is out there. They might only be subscribed to a few publications. And so I think it's maybe kind of as artists that we have this fear of selling things too hard. We want to make our creative work and we hope that people will value us. But I think it's kind of just adding a little bit of sales and a little bit of a business kind of mentality of, I have something great. I know people want to be a part of this and to support this. How do I just get in front of them more often? How do I say the right things? How do I test out different types of deals? And I think that these are kind of things that we hold ourselves back with artists because we don't want to be sellouts or too salesy. And so I think a lot of creatives handicap themselves because so much of our initial instinct is we just want to create for people. But in order to make it sustainable, we have to kind of put on more of a business cap. And sometimes that means either hiring or outsourcing or tapping marketing of people to help us and give us new perspectives on our business. I've hired plenty of marketing help, both for my books and for my website. And I learn every single time that I work with a professional on what I should be doing differently. And I think it's kind of a constant journey of thinking about, how do I almost put in the same amount of time to creatively market the stuff that I'm making as much as I'm making it? I think, to bring in a great example of this, Taylor Swift's album launches are crazy. Every time there's a new album, she's, promoting it on her now fiance Travis Kelce's podcast. She's got secrets hidden in all of her social media posts with an Easter egg hunt. Great artists need to infuse marketing with that kind of artistry, just that they infuse the product. Charlie XCX had also a great launch for Brat, and she put in a ton of different effort, different kind of things with creating a fake Instagram account for her top followers. She's on Substack too. And so I think that there's so many different ways that we can really put care and love into our marketing launches and our marketing in general that can make it feel more fun while also doing the boring groundwork to just bring people into our world and know what we have to offer.
Yeah, it seems to me the first thing that you have to do, aside from just knowing what to do, is to figure out a way to enjoy it. I mean, it doesn't come naturally. I'm a Gen Xer, and I think a lot of my readers are Gen Xers, because that's what I write about. And, self-promotion is not something that comes naturally to a lot of us because we were raised in a generation where that was like considered to be like too egotistical and like self-centered or whatever. And, I'm sort of convincing myself and my readers to sort of get over this because I think it's kind of a detriment. Like, yes, we're not the selfie generation, but, if we want to compete in the selfie generation, we do need to have, have to have some comfort level in that domain. But somebody like Taylor Swift and Charlie XCX, I always say XTC, but it's XCX. They are, I think what makes them so successful, aside from being amazing artists, is that it's natural to them what they do, like on the marketing side and social. Like it doesn't feel like forced. And even though they're not doing everything, like they have people helping them do this, it always feels natural and organic to their brand because it does feel like it's them, right? And I think one of the challenges I have is like, how do you do this in a way that feels natural to you? So not only do you enjoy doing it, but that it doesn't feel like you're just going online and getting people to like forcing people to try to buy something from you. Like what would your advice be if you agree with that premise?
Yeah, I think it's about trying to figure out what are the different places that you can get a little bit outside your comfort zone, but then what are the places you can play to your strengths? And I think for writers, Substack is such a great platform because it's so writing focused. Substack Notes is a great pipeline for new readers to find your work, and you don't have to post videos. In fact, videos don't perform very well on Substack. The written only content performs very well. Yeah. And I think that trying to understand what platforms really help you. LinkedIn is a platform where we get a lot of subscribers on, and a lot of the posts that perform best for us are written posts. And so as writers, in order to kind of create these funnels to bring people into your world, to your Substack, to your books, to your freelancing, sometimes it's just writing. One of the things I've gotten the most...
And sometimes it's video, like TikTok, it's just only video, right? Obviously. Yeah. It's not even an opportunity to write on TikTok. But if you're going to do videos, put them on TikTok or Instagram Reels, right? Don't put them on Substack. You're right. I put videos up on Substack that do really well on TikTok that get like 5 likes on Substack. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's about just trying to understand like what is the goal of a piece of content? How are you measuring its success and kind of getting into the analytics a little bit? One thing that I've noticed for memoir ghostwriting clients is that they never find me on social media. They always find me directly through my blog, through traditional SEO. And so I think that it's trying to think about like, what is your goal as a writer? And trying to figure out if you're looking for clients, they may not be on social media unless your clients, like that is what your avatar is. For me, I'm looking for clients who are a little bit older. So they're using Google or some of them ChatGPT to ask, how do I hire a memoir ghostwriter? And so I've written articles literally with the title, How to Hire a Memoir Ghostwriter, and talked about my services. And so as a writer, no matter what you're promoting, whether it's your Substack or your book, it's really trying to put yourself in the shoes of your reader and thinking about how are they going to find me? Where do they hang out? What platforms are they on? And most of our readers are like us. So it's trying to figure out where are they and how can I bridge that gap? And what's the easiest way through the platforms that I have a superpower on to get them to meet me where I'm at?
Yeah, we talked a little bit about Substack. I just want, before we get onto some of the other pillars here, I'd love to talk about LinkedIn because to me that's sort of a natural fit for a lot of people probably reading this as like a sort of extension of your Substack in a lot of cases. And I've experimented a lot with LinkedIn. I mean, LinkedIn has a formula that I've seen that's fairly successful, which was like, I thought it was this. I was struggling this way. Then I did this and now I'm this. Like it has this kind of like almost, it's very AI. It feels very AI to me. But anyway, that seems to work. But I'm curious, I'm trying to think. I've put a bunch of my Substack articles up on LinkedIn, or I've sort of done shortened versions of my Substack. The one that did the best by and far was the one that I did about ageism. And I guess it makes sense in retrospect. Like people who are reading LinkedIn probably feel like a lot of them probably feel like they've been the victim of ageism or are upset by ageism. And so an article kind of calling out ageism did really well. Then I did something about how Gen Xers are very lonely, and that one didn't do so well. And so I'm trying to figure out like, what do you do on LinkedIn that has you say you get a lot of traffic from LinkedIn. What have you found as a strategy for your post that seems to be the most successful?
Yeah, one thing that we've seen that we've done really well, and we have both our founder accounts as well as a brand account for our Substack, and we've been experimenting with both. But what we've seen that's worked the best is talking directly to audience members being like, hey, if like you're a journalist, we have something for you. Hey, are you writing a novel? Like, check out this opportunity we just posted. So really speaking to the people who are kind of like in our audience and naming and calling them out directly. And I used to do a lot of LinkedIn ghostwriting for founders. And there's kind of like the two lanes of content. One is talking to your audience directly, naming their problems, naming their role, naming who they are, and creating different types of specific content for your different audience avatars. And then two, talking about yourself as a founder. What is your story, and what is like the thing that is unique, and how can you really hook people in like from the first line? And so what we're seeing on LinkedIn for like the founder content is really kind of like having short and sweet kind of either storytelling posts or like different kinds of like serialized, like I do a lot of like, here's my day in the life as a writer and a freelancer. And so trying to think about also what's repeatable and what will kind of keep people coming back or know when they see one of our posts that it's coming from us.
And these posts are coming from your pseudoscience, because you seem to have like you've got a few brands. I'm trying to keep them in. You've got your memoir kind of like thing. Is it all kind of, is the whole kind of the funnel, is it all really going ultimately to your being a memoir writer for kind of high-end clients? Is that the ultimate goal?
No, so on social media, I really don't get memoir clients from social media. That comes almost entirely from my blog, which ranks number one on Google
Right.
the different things like that. For social media, it's mostly trying to get people into one of our 3 Substacks. So we run Make Writing Your Job, which is a writing job board and a community for writers where we do classes. We have Make Marketing Your Job, which is the same thing for marketing professionals who are freelancers. And then I have my personal Substack, Pseudoscience, where I write about, all the experiments we're running behind the scenes for the different brands and for my freelancing. But I think that when it comes to writers, I think that the more that you can post under your name and your face, brand accounts are helpful if you're wanting to grow a brand separate of yourself. But I think for most of us, posting under our name and face, because founder-led content does numbers and it really creates that relationship with your audience. And building a personal brand is the most valuable thing that writers can do in 2026 and beyond.
Let's move on to self-published books. We're saying self-published books, not books published by, and this has been something that I've had to unlearn because growing up, in the 90s and the 2000s, like, and the 80s, it was like the dream was to have like Random House or, Viking, publish your book. And like, that was not only the dream, but that was the sort of like clout that you had, like, oh, who's your publisher? Oh, my club, Farrar, Straus, Giroux, and that was like the thing. And I had like I still have a literary agent. And yet you don't necessarily subscribe to having people go down that road. That's a whole path that you have to go down, doing book proposals and getting an agent. And it's I've done it and it's very cumbersome. And honestly, I've never had a book published by a major publisher. I self-published a book, kicking and screaming. I self-published a book last year and had an amazing experience. I should call out the company. It's called Legacy Launchpad. My friend Anna David runs it. And it taught me so much about why you want to go that direction, it's better to self-publish. But I'm very curious to know, and I can share my thoughts on this, but to know why you are very much, in alignment with self-publishing and why that's really a power move, you think, for writers.
Yeah, I love having this conversation. I actually had this conversation earlier this week. I had a guest on my Substack Live, Paul Milliard, who wrote The Pathless Path. He recently published a Substack about how he turned down a $200,000 2-book deal from Penguin Random House.
Wow.
And his own book, The Pathless Path, the one that they were trying to buy, has ended up doing over $300,000 in royalties since he's published it. And he's said he's open to traditional publishing, but he hasn't received a good deal. And I think a lot of us writers are kind of in a similar boat where like we're realizing that it's actually better to have ownership over your content and that these big legacy companies are not going to give you a deal that's going to be beneficial for your career because they're just going to try to take your rights, try to lock you down, and they're going to want, and also one thing that is a prerequisite these days to querying agents or getting your book picked up by an acquiring editor is to have a ton of Substack followers or a huge audience. And if you can have a huge audience, why would you give away a huge percentage to an agent and then, take a pay cut going through a publisher when they're just going to ask you to market the book to your audience anyways, and maybe not even do any additional marketing. And I've really turned against that kind of like old model because we have things like Substack. We can go directly to our readers. And I also interviewed 2 of the women who are helping me with my book, Write for Money and Power, my publicist, Haley Raymond, and my book marketer, Renee Pavada. And the two of them have been amazing partners for getting my book out there. So you don't have to self-publish your books alone. You can hire help. But I think that the thing that we have to first realize is understanding the importance of owning our work and why the traditional model from a lot of people doesn't work, especially if you already have a big audience that you've built. It doesn't make sense to give that advantage away and just go traditional publishing when they're going to make you do all the work anyways.
Yeah, I mean, it seems what you're giving away, I guess, if you can put it that way, if you're self-publishing, is that you're, the advance, right? And that's not often a lot of money from what I hear. And the sort of infrastructure that a big publishing house gives you in terms of like marketing and publicity and like they'll do all the back end stuff, do your book cover and do your editing and all that stuff. But it's not really worth it in the end, right? I mean, unless you're a huge celebrity and like, the publishing company is going to like throw all they have at a book, right? And it doesn't seem to make sense economically.
Yeah, I saw that.
It also takes forever. It also takes
I know. It takes like 2 years. And that's why most of even my memoir ghostwriting clients, even the people who are well known, often choose self-publishing or independent publishing. Even Taylor Swift self-published her tour book. But one thing that's really interesting, she also directly put out she bypassed studios to put out her tour movie to AMC, and she just made a deal directly with them. So there's a lot of big creators who are bypassing traditional publishing. Another, great creator, writer, fantasy writer is Brandon Sanderson. He ended up going to Kickstarter and has holds a record for doing millions of dollars on Kickstarter, going directly to his fans and selling books and printing them himself. And I think that when we're thinking about these huge like celebrities and authors that are bypassing these gatekeepers, what does that mean for us? Because Brandon Sanderson is like one of the biggest fantasy authors of all time. If the publishers aren't rolling out the red carpet and making it worth his time to go through these gatekeepers, then what does that mean for the rest of us who don't have as big of followings? And I even saw on Substack this woman who posted a horror story about how she took an advance for her book and, was working on it for a year with this publishing house. And the thing that turns out with a lot of advances is that this is just kind of like this can be taken away from you. And when her acquiring editor got fired, she had to give back the advance because they couldn't find a new home for her book. So depending on the agreement that you have with a traditional publishing company, like your advance is not actually money that is just yours. It is kind of debt against the book that needs to earn it back when it gets published. And if it doesn't get published, you might not actually get the advance. And often the advance is not even paid in advance. It's paid a little bit when you sign the contract. And then often in installments that even go to beyond like 2 years after the book is out. So authors actually don't end up making very much from an advance, which isn't even an advance in a lot of cases.
Right. So I'm going to play devil's advocate here. So I did self-publish this book. It got really good reviews. I got this like 5-star review in Kirkus. I'm just going to toot my own horn here. This is very on Gen X of me, but I'm just trying to like give some context here. So it got like 5 stars in Kirkus. It got a wonderful review. It was called Right About Now for those keeping score at home. And it was actually a kind of curated my I have a podcast called Right About Now where I talk to some top writers about how they got started, like their origin stories. Like you would be in this book if I was putting it out now, and like how they got started and how they became so successful. And again, well reviewed, hasn't really made a lot of money and hasn't really made a big splash. I did everything wrong. Like I didn't market it at all. I did a few podcasts. Anna company helped me in the beginning getting it like very highly rated on Amazon. I'm like a #1 bestseller on Amazon on one of their lists and stuff. But it hasn't, and I'm saying it's not finished. Like I only released the book last year, but I'm wondering, what did I do wrong? You don't know what I did, but how do you promote like this book you've got out right now? This is a self-published book. What are you doing to make sure that people know about your book? Aside from doing this wonderful podcast we've got 111 people watching. Hey, what's up?
Well, I'm lucky that like the fact that I've like coming out with this book in January means that I get to talk to you.
Yeah, and this is very important. This part's important.
Yeah, and I think that like one of the reasons that I hired Renee Pavada, who's my book marketer, and I did a whole Substack live talking with her about her strategy is that she is an author herself, and she, with her own strategy, sold $100,000 worth of her books, and she has no social media presence. She has no podcasts, and she did it all through Amazon algorithm, keyword and SEO, and Amazon ads. That's it. and a
That's
little bit of a
amazing.
podcast tour. And so I'm working with her in thinking about like when you're an author, it's really thinking about the importance of your Amazon page, because Amazon is the biggest bookstore and the biggest place where people buy books.
Wow.
And so for Write for Money and Power, not only am I talking to wonderful people like yourself and kind of chatting about the book and what's in it, but I'm also really trying to think about the pre-order campaign. I'm offering people pre-order bonuses. We have a founding membership for Make Writing Your Job, where you can join our quarterly mastermind groups and have access to different kind of elements, and you can get all of that by pre-ordering books. And I noticed somebody asked for the name. Renee Puvada. If you email her, go to her website, Smoking Hot Books, let her know that I sent you. And I also have an interview with her on Make Writing Your Job if you want to check that out to hear more about her.
He sounds amazing. I'm definitely going. Hey Renee, I'm gonna call her. All right, moving on from books, let's talk about freelance writing as a means to make money. Now, this kind of, I think, encompasses your memoir, ghostwriting, right? That's what you mean. There's a lot of different ways to make money as a freelance writer, and I've definitely explored a lot of these. Again, I'm not at the 7-figure mark; it should be, but I'll tell you one thing that is not going to get you to 7 figures, and that's writing for like traditional media outlets, like even like the New York Times, which pays abysmally. So that's not really what you mean, right? I mean, it's nice to get your byline in the New York Times. I love it. It was one of the thrills of my life when I could open up the New York Times and see my name there, but it's not going to pay the bills. So what do you mean when you what are the opportunities for freelance writers right now in this kind of economy of 2025 to make some money as a writer?
Yeah, so I think that when it comes to freelance writing, there's a lot of opportunities. What we see on our writing job board at Make Writing Your Job each week, there's a lot of high-paying copywriting jobs, because the thing with copywriting is if all writers and all marketers are using AI, then the advantage is truly the human creativity that is being added on top. And so copywriting, we're seeing copywriting jobs at $4,000, $7,000 a month for some really competitive pay for these roles. So I did a lot of copywriting in the past, and I still see that this is a really lucrative field, because copywriting is part of marketing and sales, and companies always have a high amount of spend in these categories when it comes to the things they're investing in. And then when it comes to the book world, we're seeing this blow up because of self-publishing. There's so many. In fact, one of our recent testimonials for the Writing Job Board was from one of our founding members, Allison, who basically in the course of like 6 months completely went from not being a professional writer to growing a really big writing business where she focuses on developmental editing. She's been raising her rates consistently over the past few months.
What's developmental editing?
Yeah, so developmental editing is the type of editing that is, I think, the most fun, where you come into a book and you tell the author what that they can improve structurally, with pacing, with characters. You're not doing any proofreading. You're just coming in to tell the author, giving you your thoughts and your feedback, and sometimes even your pitches on what you think can make the book better. And so developmental editing we have a bunch of those jobs on the Writing Job Board. And I think that there's some really cool jobs like that. So we actually did a panel with several of our writers who've landed book-related jobs on our Writing Job Board, and kind of their advice on how to break into the book world. So the book world's kind of blowing up because of the self-published books, and that pathway becoming more popular.
That's so interesting. What else? Okay, so there's the memoir writing. When you say copywriting, do you mean like native, like content marketing, like the kind of like if a company is putting out a blog, like you would write the content for that, or do you mean actually like ad copywriting, or maybe it's both?
Yeah, it's kind of a combination of both. We're not really seeing a ton of very, very short form ad copywriting anymore, but we are seeing a combination of like copywriting for landing pages, content writing for Substack. We're also seeing different types of writing for YouTube. Script writing has been pretty huge. We've seen a lot of like pretty interesting jobs in YouTube script writing. And then of course,
YouTube script writing. That's the first I've heard of that. What does that mean?
Yeah. So basically there's a lot of creators who are making tons of money on YouTube, again, because they're kind of competing against Netflix, but also because their ad revenue is so great and there's so many eyeballs on YouTube. So we've seen, in fact, we had a client come to us directly to hire from our job board for a romantic comedy personal essay style YouTube channel, where she films these very cinematic, beautiful YouTube videos with like a voiceover, and she was looking for a writer to help her write the voiceovers for her scripts. Wow. And so there's a lot of very creative, interesting, very filmic kind of YouTube channels that are hiring writers. And so I think that when people think about freelance writing in 2026, they're like, oh, am I going to have to go like write boring technical copy? It's like, no, there's actually a lot of creativity that's been unlocked by the creator economy. And these influencers are hiring writers in order to help them. And even just like the short form copywriting and ghostwriting, I've seen a lot of writers make a lot of money by specializing on LinkedIn, on X, and just doing ghostwriting for founders, for VCs, and for people who have to maintain like a social presence. And it helps support their business by doing so. And so ghostwriting is huge, even in the short form areas, because it's like AI can't write a very compelling tweet in the way that humans can, because the humor and the way that you need to like engage with community and restack posts, there's so much that comes into when it building these social presence and ghostwriting for founders and for brands.
So the question that comes to me is like that all sounds great, but then it always comes back to, well, how do you find those clients? And that seems to be the sort of $1 million question, literally, is how do you, and you have been successful. What we've been, that's just the whole conversation. You've been talking about, using your blog through SEO, for them to find you that way. You've also, used your Substack effectively, right? In some ways. Am I missing something? How do you find those kind of even corporate clients, individual sort of thought leader type people, but also corporations that might want to hire you? How are they finding their clients? I mean, their writers.
Yeah, so there's 3 ways that I recommend for freelancers to find clients. One is obviously through our writing job board. We often have clients that I meet with directly who post jobs to the writing job board to hire, and we have all sorts of different types of jobs each week. 2 is building a blog or a Substack or a presence where you are ranking on Google for hire a, and then whatever your specialty is. And then 3 is directly emailing or messaging the people that you want to write for. Cold email, I don't do it anymore because I mostly just get inbound leads. But I think that if you're trying to break into a different type of freelance writing or you're wanting to build your client roster, cold emails work great. I used to just go when I was copywriting and download email lists like the growth list, which has a list of all of the startups that hadn't gotten funding that week. And I would just cold email startups and being like, hey, I'm a copywriter, let me write for you. And that landed me tons of clients. And so I think that a lot of us writers, like when it comes to landing clients, it's the $1 million question, but it's also the thing that requires legwork in the beginning to really get in front of people. We sometimes have people who like use our writing job board and they're like, I applied to 3 jobs, I didn't get anything. And I'm like, definitely need to apply to more than 3.
Yeah.
We also see people who say, I submitted my first pitch ever. And like and I'm like a new writer and I landed it first thing. I'm like, great, that's awesome. Keep going. And so it's a numbers game, truly. And this is kind of where you just need to kind of like put in the reps. And if your client roster is not full, then that should be your priority every morning, is like 3 to 4 hours of just like outreach until your client roster is totally full. And people are like, 3 to 4 hours? That's crazy. It's like, if you're not full with clients and you're not at capacity, then getting new clients in, especially if you're a full-time freelancer, should be your main priority. And then once you have a full roster of clients, you have more clients coming in, then it's about raising your rates so you can build more time into your schedule and take on fewer clients.
I love this. God, so much great information here. You are a wealth of information. Your pseudoscience is quite effective.
Thank you.
Talking about, well, one thing I didn't hear you mention was like answering ads on LinkedIn and Indeed for, jobs. Do you find that to be just a waste of time in this day and age? I mean, I have to say, and again, I wrote a little bit about this because I think there's a little bit of ageism at work, but, I have found that when I apply for these jobs on LinkedIn, like I don't ever even get a response. And believe me, I have a pretty deep resume. I mean, I've worked as a writer for like 30 years, and not just, in archaic publications. Like I've worked, whatever, I'm working right now. So I don't get why I never get a response. But I also feel like it's kind of a waste of time at a certain point. Like I could apply to like 100 jobs and I don't hear back. Like I've just spent 3 hours doing that. Like it just seems like a waste of time. What's your take on that?
Every writer in every category is going to have the better platform for them. And so what I've seen work best just for every niche is completely different. And so I think that the advice that I give to people is like, if you're not hearing back and you're applying to dozens and dozens and dozens of jobs every day, then maybe shift either the way that you're approaching out or the platform. Like one platform that everybody says is dead and has said is dead is Upwork. But I've made over $300,000 on the platform, and a lot of writers in our community actually get tons of work from Upwork.
Wait, you made $300,000 on Upwork?
Yes. And I think that when people are thinking about Upwork, they think about only the low paying jobs that seem to spam that website. And that's part of the reason why on our writing job board, we actually have our team of curators go through Upwork every single day and just pull out the best looking, highest paying jobs. Same thing with LinkedIn and Indeed and all of those, because there are hidden gems. And I've landed 6-figure clients in the memoir space earlier on in my career from Upwork. And people are like, is that really truly like accessible for people now? Like, is Upwork dead? And it's like, Upwork's not dead. It's just an annoying platform that you have to figure out how to use and like follow their rules exactly. But I do think that these platforms are still viable for client outreach, because these clients are on here posting and often spending money on posting jobs because they want to find a freelancer. I think Contra is another platform that is a little undervalued. They don't have a ton of jobs, but I think that they're another one that you can kind of throw in the mix too. But for LinkedIn and Indeed, we try to kind of like find the best looking jobs, because there are a lot of like spammy jobs or jobs that aren't very good there. So it's just a matter of kind of shifting platforms, shifting how you're doing your cover letters, shifting like the hook that you kind of pull the client in with to try to figure out what is going to get to somebody to hop on a call with you as quickly as possible.
Let's talk really quickly about AI, because then I want to turn it over to some questions from our watchers here. But what is AI hurting us, helping us? What's your take on AI right now? I mean, it's hard to have a conversation with a writer without even mentioning that, because I think if people feel it's like an existential threat to a lot of their, to their livelihood. I haven't really directly felt it yet, but I'm wary of it and a little concerned about it. What's your take on it?
Yeah, I definitely think that first of all, I don't think that people should worry. I think that a good sign of this is that I talk about this a lot, but recently Anthropic and a bunch of other startups have been posting job openings for writers, and they're paying in the 6-figure range for writers. And if Anthropic, who created Claude, if Claude was a good enough writer, they wouldn't need to hire somebody. Right. So I think that when it comes to what writers are best at, which is creativity and storytelling, that is something that AI can't replace. And if every company is using AI, then the magic extra like secret sauce is going to be human writers. So I think that that's something that a lot of writers can like breathe a sigh of relief. And then I think it's about trying to understand which types of writing are going to be more, on the shoulders of writers and not on these tools. I think these tools are great, and people should check them out and try to use them and see how they can help with different elements of their process. But what I think that part of the reason why I left copywriting to go into more memoir ghostwriting is because you can't tell a book, or tell AI like, hello, like AI, write me an entire book. It's not going to give you something that's going to be really thoughtful and meaningful, and it's going to keep losing context. So memoir ghostwriting is great and something that I recommend to people because it is a bespoke kind of special experience. Even long form books and other nonfiction niches like business writing, I think are really great places to be. So ghostwriting, I think, is something that is harder to outsource to AI because so often AI can't capture the voice of certain creators. And so that's why they hire writers, is to really capture their voice and have their content stand out. And if everybody's using ChatGPT and like just kind of putting it out like verbatim on the internet, then the way that you stand out is having that voice. And so ghostwriting as a whole, I think, is a really lucrative industry for people who, especially because like I'm in San Francisco and I've heard plenty of founders saying, the way that you can get meetings in San Francisco is if you have 10,000 followers on X. And so these people are spending money and throwing money at ghostwriters to help them grow their accounts. And so there's a lot of opportunities for writers to help people with the things that they have in mind, whether that's growing a Substack and ghostwriting on Substack. So it's just really understanding like, what are your skills best matched to, and what kind of problems are you excited to help people solve?
The one thing that we haven't talked about, again, so I'm going to get to questions. Sorry, just all these things are popping into my head. We've talked a lot about, we've talked about freelance writing, we've talked about writing books, we've talked about Substack. What about events? Like you've done some live events, right? What is your take on sort of building community and like, offering either like Zoom seminars or in real life events? I see some of the people I really admire on Substack do events, and I haven't gone to any of them. Some are virtual and some are real. And I have a Gen X group that meets every 2 weeks, and it's been wonderful. And you guys, if you're interested, hit me up on the chat, and I can invite you to the next one. But we basically just get on it. Right now, it's a Zoom because we're all over the country, and the world. But we just get on and kind of talk about what's on our mind. And I feel like there's something there. I don't know what it is yet. I need somebody that's like you to tell me, what's there? Like, what am I tapped into? But do you believe that that's an important part of somebody's possible, money-making strategy?
Yeah, definitely. Especially if you're building a community on as part of Substack or wherever else you're building a community on. I think that like even right now we're having a live event and it's really cool to meet people in the chat and kind of be a part of this ecosystem and to talk with you about the things that we're excited about talking about when it comes to writing. And so I've held a lot of different live events as part of my Substack community, Make Writing Your Job. We do regular classes where I teach on different topics of writing and creativity and freelancing. We have our quarterly mastermind group for our founding members where we gather our different founding members to be able to kind of like bounce ideas around and review portfolios and things like that. So I think that the nice thing about the internet is we can reach a ton of different people all over the world who are interested in the things we're interested about. So I think building community should be a part of anybody's strategy if you're wanting to reach readers and writers who are like you and are interested in the things that you're interested in. And I think that if writers are very introverted, it's about trying to figure out the right balance of those events and those communities that serve you. Because I think that the goal of, and the whole reason why I wrote Write for Money and Power and why I created the Substack Make Writing Your Job is because I found that my life became infinitely better when I was able to create the life that I wanted to live, not a life somebody else wanted for me. And so that's kind of why we do all of this, is to try to kind of create the thing that works for us that also serves our communities and the world around us.
So great. I mean, and that's what you mean by money and power. It sounds very Machiavellian, but actually you're talking about just taking ownership of your own life and experience. Right? Those words sometimes I think, make writers or creative people bristle. Money and power. We're not in it for money and power, but that's sort of a myth and an old way of thinking. That sort of starving artist mentality is not where it should be. And it's hard for Gen Xers to kind of get past that. I will admit that. Not that I've always wanted money. Power part, I never think of myself as a writer as having power, but you do.
Yeah.
And what do you mean by power? Let's define that.
Yeah, well, I think that when it comes to power in my book, Write for Money and Power, it's about having the power to be able to take a Thursday off and spend time with your family, or to go on a trip to see a place you've never been before. It's about having the power to, spend like a month like in a cabin writing that fiction book you've always dreamed of. Well, I named my book Write for Money and Power because I really wanted writers to think about their career differently. And also I wanted to unearth some of the mythology behind the starving artist myth. Like a lot of people don't realize that William Shakespeare, owned a percentage of the Globe Theater and all of the proceeds went to him. He had a passive income stream. A lot of people don't realize that a lot of artists in history we think of as starving actually weren't. And I think it strips us of our power as writers when we forget about the business model that can underpin our work and allow us to have more freedom to live the lives that we love.
Right. And these days, it's not about having an agent, having this sort of like group of people that are monitored, but it's about taking ownership of your own career, which I think is so different maybe this time, in this moment of time, than it's been before. All right. So I want to get to some questions and I'll let you go. Let's see here. Jody asks, I write scripts for a specific genre of podcasts. What is the overall market for that sort of thing? So writing scripts for podcasts, what is my experience with podcasts? I've made some money on podcasts. Where I have had luck is I started my own podcast company, which is like a production company that makes podcasts for other people. I have found that there was definitely a market for that, especially during COVID. When I first started, it was crazy. But as far as like writing scripts for podcasts, do you have any experience with that?
Yeah, John, I think you and I have a lot in common. I also started a podcast production company.
Oh, wow.
In COVID.
We need to trade notes. Yeah.
I know. So I actually had a live events company in LA and we had brought together open mic nights. And then when COVID hit, we brought all of our performers to us to create scripted podcasts. And so we put out a few scripted podcasts. And I will say that it was a labor of love, but not money.
Yeah.
And I think that when it comes to the podcasting world, there's not as much money in it just because it's harder to monetize. Like there's no paywall in podcasts unless you're on Patreon or Substack. But I think that's why writers are coming to Substack, because I think it's a better place to monetize. But when you're freelancing specifically to earn money, I think it's better to think about what types of clients can pay you the rates that you really should be earning as a freelancer so that you can fund the life that you want. And there's still some really great projects out there that are very creative that are coming from clients who have a good business model. So you do need to work with clients in industries that are well funded, because if you don't, then you're not going to have enough clients that are going to be able to meet the rates that you need to set.
Yeah, that's such a good point. It's, who has the money now to spend? And unfortunately, I mean, I love the medium of podcasting. But I now I see it more as a sort of way to market yourself, as opposed to a way to directly make some money. It's been some hard lessons that I've had to learn, but that is definitely the case. But I will continue to try to produce podcasts for people. It's just that there's less money in that world as there was during maybe 3 years ago, say, when the sort of like before the bubble burst. Okay, let's see here. Somebody asked about photography. Any tips for freelance photographers? Do you
Yeah,
have
I
any?
think that when it comes to freelance, I know a few freelance photographers, and the ones who make the most are the ones who specialize in the highest paying form of freelance photography, which is wedding photography. People will always spend the most money ever in their lives for their wedding. And so if you're able to, wherever you are located, do wedding photography or engagement photos, I think that that is a really great market. Another market that I've seen friends really succeed in is branding photography, because in the era of personal brands, having photography of yourself, and I've spent money on brand photo shoots. I know other friends have too. That's another kind of area where it's a business expense. So it's trying to think again about like what is kind of the area of freelancing where the clients are, the money that is going to be spent is either a business expense or for a really important life moment.
Yeah, that's a great tip. I think that's the only questions that I can see, but I'm scrolling here. If you guys have a question, let me know. I will end with this question, which I always, feel like I like to hear an answer to. And that's like the best advice you've ever given or maybe received as a writer that's really stuck with you after all these years.
Yeah, I think that the best advice that I've ever gotten was from a mentor in college. And he was much just a mentor I was paired with. I didn't know him very well, but he gave me a piece of advice that stuck with me, and it's honor the work. And I think that whether you're a freelancer or a Substacker or a writer putting out books, the intention that you put into your words really comes through to the reader. And so if you're honoring the work and giving it the love and the care that it deserves, then the people who you're giving it to will really feel that. And the business model stuff, that all comes later, that all comes separately. But if you're honoring the work and really protecting that space, I think that everything else is something that you can add strategy, you can add layers to it. But if you don't honor the work, then you're not going to have something that is going to really strike a chord. So honoring the work is what I always come back to.
That's a really wonderful way to put it. And guess what can't honor the work? Generative AI, ChatGPT, Claude, for all their good things that maybe they provide, the sort of money, the time saving, they are not able to do it. It is not able to do that. Somebody asked, a book that has changed your life.
That's a tough one.
That's
There's
a hard
so
one.
many. I think for me, one of the book that changed my life, and the author is controversial, but Rich Dad, Poor Dad, just because it made me think about money and investing
I read
differently.
that.
I think,
Yeah.
and the parable in the beginning is really, really interesting. And I also think it is a good take on nonfiction, that if you start nonfiction with a story, you can really pull people in. And I think that that's why that book, which is also, it's a self-published book, by the way, really blew up, is because it pulls you in with a narrative to describe what it's about to teach you. And I think that's something that I talk a lot with my business ghostwriting clients who have a business book that they're trying to market. You have to start with story no matter what your topic is.
Yeah, it's a great book. It's definitely a very useful book, especially for people who don't, think about money a lot, and that isn't like top of mind. It's an interesting way to think about money, and I recommend it as well. All right, well, this has been amazing. We are exactly at the top of the hour, and so I'm going to let you go. Amy Suto, the book is called "Write for Money and Power." It is available. There it is. It is available wherever you may find books these days. And you are just a wealth of information. If people want to subscribe to your Substack, where can they go as well?
Yeah, so you can go to makewritingyourjob.com. And then I also have my personal Substack, pseudoscience.com.
Pseudoscience.com. Thanks again. I'm at Small Talk. You found me here. I hope you guys subscribe. Hey, maybe you'll even pay to subscribe. That would be wonderful. But it is always a pleasure, Amy. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Well, that is the show. Thank you so much for listening to Right About Now. Once again, I am your host, Jonathan Small. If you want to find out more about me, you can go to rightaboutnowmedia.com. I also have a newsletter on Substack called Small Talk. That is where I talk about all things Generation X. So if you're into Gen X, you might want to check that out. We also have a podcast called Small Talk, giving lots of love to small talk these days. Hey, if you liked what you heard today, do me a favor and give me a shout out on your podcast platform. Just give a little thumbs up, a rating, even a review. It goes a long way in helping people find this podcast. And as Amy lets you guys know, it's all about discoverability. So I would really appreciate that. Until next week, this is John Small encouraging you to do the right thing.